Hello, everyone. So good to have you here. I just thought I would jump on live today because I know it's a Saturday and normally we got like kind of a produced show that premieres for you every day. But this is kind of a big deal because the story that we've been talking about, it's Anheuser-Busch, it's Bud Light. And I've said, listen, this boycott has some legs. And sure enough, we're getting proof of that right now because the company's freaked out enough that they're doing what I would argue is actually the right thing. They are getting rid of the executive in charge of the Bud Light marketing campaign. Well, maybe we can't quite say getting rid of. She's going to take a, quote, leave of absence. That's according to Anheuser-Busch. They're just coming out with this news on a Saturday afternoon, thinking maybe people wouldn't notice. Maybe they want people to notice. I would argue that. I mean, they may be trying to bury it here, but come on, let's be frank. You want to publicize this from here to Sunday. I don't think it's going to make a difference, though. I think actually the damage has really been done because there's a few things going on. First of all, people think, oh, Anheuser-Busch is such an American company, rah, rah, America. It's really not. It's really not. I mean, do not forget, this is owned by AB InBev. InBev was that merger between the Brazilian beer company, mega company, and a Belgian company. The headquarters are overseas. They're in Belgium, and they just went in, they bought Anheuser-Busch for some 50 some odd million dollars, maybe $52 billion, $52 billion back in 2008. And so they created this massive conglomerate. It is a multinational company. And when we talk about these big global companies, it's clear that some of the sort of political rhetoric or the maybe globalist sort of ideas, they have infiltrated AB InBev. I mean, I don't know how else to explain what she was doing there. Her name was, and I know I'm going to get it wrong, so forgive me in advance, Alyssa. Well, maybe I shouldn't even try. What do you guys think? It's a difficult name to say. I'm just going to make sure that I try to say it as phonetically as I possibly can. Anyway, she went to Harvard. She studied marketing and then gets a job at Anheuser-Busch. The CEO of the company also went to Harvard. Am I seeing a theme? I think Harvard needs to do a Harvard case study on what not to do with a company. If you got a great brand, you don't want to ruin it, right? I mean, isn't part of this supposed to be leadership? So maybe you want to change your brand or make it more whatever. I mean, look, so what? They had the frat guys drinking their beer. That's probably a decent audience considering that they're going to continue drinking the beer as they get older. And you want to continue maybe adding to that audience, but you don't want to get rid of the base, right? Like you do not want to lose the only customers you have. And we can have a whole debate about maybe you just need to make a better beer, guys, but it is what it is. And she was in charge of expanding this. And she gave a big speech on some podcast saying, well, it's just too fratty. And I've been put in place to totally remake this brand. You cannot totally remake a brand by alienating all the people that drink the stuff. And making it worse, you're making it political. That's what Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light became. I mean, think about it. It's totally political right now. Imagine, guys, like if you're, or gals, whoever's watching, guys, I'll start with you. If you're on a date and the girl you're with orders a Bud Light, it's like, okay, we know where she stands. If I were on a date, which fortunately I've been married a long time, I don't do those anymore, but if I were on a date and a guy ordered a Bud Light, I'd be like, yeah, okay. Where they stand. And that's not what a beer should be. But I've talked to so many conservative friends who are like, what the heck? It's like they want to force feed us this garbage. All this insanity that we're all really, really worked up about. Now they want to literally shove it down our throats with this beer. And people are like, I'm not having it. I was in a restaurant the other day and they were reading off the beers and I was like, just waiting for it. Like, I didn't want to hear it. I didn't even want to hear Bud Light, right? Because as soon as you hear it, then you know it's going to launch you into some political conversation. This is not a good idea, right? And by the way, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you've seen it by now, but if you haven't, let me play this. I'm just going to go by the name Mulvaney, who's just giddy over the idea of getting the face on the beer. You've probably seen it, but if you haven't, I'm going to show you anyway. Because this is just
impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us.
Listen.
So, I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. and I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way, it's a cause to celebrate. This month, I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too.
Yeah, like, am I right? I mean, this is like marketing 101, what not to do. How not to lose your basic customer. So this didn't go over so well, as you can imagine. By the way, so good to have you here. I'm just seeing some of you here on the channel. Arnold, good to have you. Corona is owned by AB. You're right. You know what? Like, you know, and it gets a little bit murky because some people have like the licensing rights in the United States. I mean, Corona might be one that actually another company, a U.S. company, is it Constellation, that has the right to market it. It gets kind of confusing. But what I would say is, look, AB's got, Anheuser-Busch has got InBev. AB InBev has got a ton of beers, like all over the world, like a zillion of them. And so I think they're kind of worried, and this might be to your point, Emperor, they're a little bit worried that you might actually start to see a big, broad boycott, right? If we're going to list off all the names of all the beers, people could really, go to town on this. I think that you're starting to see already people start to support more and more their local brewers because there's this backlash, if you would, but it's really good. So good to have you all here. Salvatore, listen, if you guys have not subscribed, I have to ask you to subscribe. I always forget, and I do the show and I tape the show every day. It's all ad-libbed. So there's no script telling me to subscribe. So inevitably, I forget to ask you to subscribe and to hit the bell. So if you haven't done that already, do me that favor. Go and just hit the subscribe button. Let me see if we can put it up for you. Hit the subscribe button and do me the favor of, in fact, hitting the bell as well. That way, when I'm here, when we have a show. We have a show every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's all for free. I mean, you're going to hear a few commercials now and then, but it's all for free. Listen, I want to show you the stock price. Here we go. This is Anheuser-Busch, where it closed out on Friday. Can you see this on the screen, guys? Let me know. If you see it, here's where it was way back, $66.73. I need like a pointer or something that I can use on here. $66.73. That's where it was kind of around April 1st, April 2nd. And what this tells you here is that the stock was, not doing great necessarily, but it was okay. And then look at how it cratered. If you can see on that chart, it just started to crater when all the news about Dylan Mulvaney came out. And all the customers were like, whoa, I don't think the frat houses are going to be drinking that on Saturday night. So then you saw the stock really start to get hurt. It's kind of come back a teeny tiny bit because, this is such a big company and you're talking about a market cap that's just enormous. And so when they start to lose, say $3 a share, which is what happened, that's like a $5-6 billion hit to the overall company. So even though they're at $65.52, kind of trading flat on Friday, ending the day flat on Friday, they actually had been down most of the day. Maybe word started to get out that they were going to part ways with Alyssa. I still don't have it right. Let me get the pronouncer on that one because she's not a very smart lady despite all the Harvard education, but nonetheless, we don't want to completely mutilate her name. Anyway, it's $65.52. Maybe some people are thinking, well, maybe they can pull it together. I'm not so sure that is true. I mean, what do you think? Are you going to be drinking Bud Light now or are you like forever scarred? I'm kind of forever scarred. It's like Nike. I mean, I'm sorry, but like, my kids, I'm not buying them Nike shoes. And you know what? I'm not buying any more Nike. I used to buy their tennis skirts. Full disclosure. I love tennis skirts. Like I wear tennis skirts even when I'm not playing tennis because they're just kind of comfortable and fun. And I had a lot of Nike tennis skirts. So that is no more. I'm not buying any more Nike because I don't appreciate that either. I don't like these brands. It's really, I see it as a woman, is making fun of women. I mean, you look at Dylan Mulvaney and that whole thing, and basically he's trying to say we're a bunch of space cadets that don't even know what the NCAA tournament really is, or that we don't understand basketball or we don't understand sports. And he's being this quintessential sort of 1950s housewife making fun of us while simultaneously downing the beer that somehow now all these frat guys are going to continue to drink. Lee, good to have you here. Go wicked, go broke. Yeah, I mean, this really shows you, if you look at that stock, that go woke, go broke is in fact for real. I mean, that's, and if you look at it compared to where the overall market is, or if you look at compared to where its competitor, and that's what I want to get to in a second, because I got another stock chart I want to show you. Its competitor is actually killing it. Why? Because everyone I talked to was like, okay, well, if I cannot have Bud Light, I'm going to have Coors Light. And they say Coors Light apparently is a better beer anyway. So let's take a look over here at TAP. Shares of TAP. Don't you like the tickers? TAP, TAP, Bud, AB InBev is BUD. Remember the expression, this Bud's for you? I mean, I think we're all saying, wait a second, this Bud's for who? Anyway, take a look at shares of Molson Coors. You've got Molson Coors at $58.32 a share right now. Wow. Look at where Molson Coors was, ticker symbol TAP, back when this whole ordeal started. I'm looking at the computer. I can see $51.68. So that's a gain of nearly $7 a share. So while Bud Light lost about $3, rallied back, is still down $1 and change, the competitor is gaining and gaining, up more than 1% on Friday and gaining roughly $7 a share. So what does that tell you if you are the CEO? That tells you that this whole like marketing thing with this particular woman is not really working out. But I still question, because if you listen to her, and we played the soundbite actually on the show the other day. It has a very similar thumbnail to the one that started this. It just doesn't say live on it. But we've been doing a lot on Bud Light. And what she said effectively was that she had to change it. Like the brand was dying. It was dying. She had to come in and like really just energize it. And there were some marketing people and even some analysts and talk show hosts like, oh, I don't know, the guy over in CNN, the guy that keeps, just stepping in it over and over and over again, Don Lemon. You know Don Lemon. So he said, oh, this is all going to go over. She'll be proven right in time, blah, blah, blah. Bud Light is going to expand its base. I'm sorry, not happening because it's diverged too far from what it is and what it was. And I got a note from one of you guys. By the way, if you leave comments on these videos below, just know that I do read them. I try to read all of them, actually. And even if I don't respond, just know that I'm hearing from you. And I appreciate it because, listen, it's not easy. And, we've talked about this before. It is really not easy to break through in this environment. And so it's hard, especially as a conservative, frankly, really, really challenging. And so I love that you've been so supportive of me for the last couple of years. And, people say, Trish, why aren't you going back on TV? I don't want to go back on TV. I really don't. I don't want to have to work for anyone. I want to actually just have a direct connection with all of you. I mean, that is what really, to me as a journalist, is meaningful. And having that kind of ownership over my content, not having to listen to anyone saying, well, you need to do this or you need to do that, or there's these rules. I just want sort of a pure connection if in any way I can get it with you. So it's why I'm here. Do me the favor, subscribe, spread the word, share the video. You're welcome to clip from it, etc. So thank you for that. But I do read the comments. And one of you said something really, really powerful the other day. I actually read it out in the main show because you were talking about how as a kid, you went and you lived in Missouri and St. Louis, and Anheuser-Busch was just so much a part of the culture. And as a little kid, you can remember your dad drinking it and all his friends drinking it. And then, when you got old enough, and maybe when you weren't old enough, you were drinking, and it was like a guy's guy thing, right? Like, and there was sort of a culture around it and a sort of family-like feeling around the idea of having a Bud. Or maybe if you're watching your weight, you're having a Bud Light. And I know that, like, I get it. And so this particular gentleman, he's destroyed by this. He's like, I can't ever drink it again. I will never drink it again because they have totally lost me. I think about one of my friends who grew up in that area too. And I actually haven't talked to him specifically about this yet, but it's like he was really into Bud. Like, I'm like, whoa, all right, buddy. Like, he really, I remember at his wedding, and his wife was too, because she was from the same area. And so they were really, really into Anheuser-Busch. And I'm sure this is a little bit gutting for people because it was hard enough when the company got sold to the Brazilians. But now when they're just kind of ignoring the culture, it's like you're ignoring the one that brought you to the dance. And you're just saying, don't care about you. I'm moving on. And that's effectively what this felt like kind of a slap in the face. So I don't know as the stock is going to recover much. Forgive me. This is not a Bud here, just a little bit of water. I don't know as the stock is really going to recover much from this. I mean, it certainly could. And like I said, they have a very diverse portfolio. But if this is the mindset within the company, they're going to have challenges. I mean, this go woke nonsense, it's really starting to affect some of these companies' bottom lines. But I want to talk to you about where it comes from. because there's a method to the madness. And it comes from this ESG environment. You've heard me talk about this before. I mean, there's a company called BlackRock, which is run by Larry Fink. And I've interviewed Larry many, many times over the years and been in discussions with him, et cetera. And his whole theory is government can really, from the top down, with private business, start to enforce certain behaviors. And the thinking is, from his standpoint, well, you know what? We're not going to invest in that company if they don't play by this set of rules. The problem with that is that all of a sudden you start investing in companies because they have however many African Americans, however many women, however many transgenders on their board, however many gay people on their board. And instead of investing in a company because it makes money and customers like it, you're investing for all these other reasons that have nothing to do with the actual profitability of a company. And so there's this kind of urge for so many of these big corporations to say, wait a second, do we have the right ESG score? And ESG means environmental, social governance. Environmental, in other words, I talked to an energy investor who's like, wait a second, I need to invest in oil companies, but because of their ESG scores, I can't on behalf of these pension funds. There's this insanity around it all. And it starts really, or started in part because of BlackRock adopting this. BlackRock runs, I don't know what the latest numbers are. I think the last time I checked, it was some $12 to $14 trillion that they had in terms of assets under management. That's a whole lot of money. I mean, that makes them the largest in the world. And when you think about having that much control over capital, I mean, you got like, more than half the size of US GDP. That's like more than half of the country's output that you're in control of every year. And so when you say, well, I'm going to make the rules and these are the rules, well, companies are like, how do we satisfy them? Is our ESG score good enough? If you're an energy company or oil company, I'm sorry, like it's just, you're not going to be good enough, right? Because that's just the way their mindset is. It might be really profitable. So you're not going to be rewarded for that profitability. If you're AB InBev, they're like, ooh, what can we do? We have a problem because Bud Light seems too fratty and it's toxic masculinity, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe our ESG score is going to be affected. So let's do this. Let's hire somebody who will just kind of blow it all up. And that's exactly what he did. So my concern is just from sort of economic standpoint, right? In terms of our national security and our strength and our economy, all these things go hand in hand. We need to do a better job at holding these pensions accountable. I mean, if you have a state, if you're a union worker in a state, or you work for the state that you're in, you should be asking these questions like, who are we investing our retirement in? Because my concern, by the way, like selfishly would be, what's your retirement going to look like? Because if all these companies are losing money and if eventually the jig is up, well, that's not going to be very good for you in your retirement. And so I think states, and by the way, Florida's done this, Texas has done this, Kansas has done it, or Texas is doing this, Kansas has done this. They need to be more forceful in terms of saying, we're not going to put our money, our pensions with these companies that aren't actually investing based on real standards. And by real standards, I mean, like, what is the success of this company? Not is what is the ratio of male to female, black to white, how many gay people, how many transgenders. You could go on and on and on. That has nothing to do with the success of the business. So I think that there's an effort in some of these big conglomerates, and this is what this company is now, in these big conglomerates to say, let's be woke. Well, all that wokeness is going to do is really alienate your customer base. Look at Disney. They're another good example of this. Bob Iger, I know he's coming back in, but the other Bob Chapek, really ran into problems because, well, think about that Lightyear movie. They tried to do this spin-off with Buzz Lightyear. It was a disaster. There were some scenes in there that the parents didn't like because they were just a little too woke. So the movie failed. And I'm not surprised. And this is just sort of the reality. I mean, it's kids' entertainment. And so a lot of parents that don't agree with that ideology are going to say, well, gee, maybe I'm not going to take my kids to see that. I mean, let's not forget who we are as a nation. We are a capitalist nation. That is what we were founded on, these principles of freedom and capitalism. And look, you can't guarantee success in an environment like that. You can never guarantee anything, right? but you should be able to at least offer some equality in terms of opportunity, which means you can't have all this red tape. There's no equal opportunity if the game is rigged by Larry Fink and his friends over at BlackRock, who, by the way, all travel by private jet, mind you. I want to see their ESG footprint. You know what? That's a good idea. I wonder what BlackRock's ESG footprint is. Doesn't matter because it's a private company, right? But they've got to be really bad because all they do is travel on private planes all over the world. I'm sure it's horrible, but they're the ones saying, nope, okay, we're going to X you off, we're going to X you off, we're going to X you off. That is a problem for us as a nation, and we really need to stand up to it. And I hope that Bud Light is learning its lesson. I really do, because when you look at Molson Coors and you see the success of Molson Coors, if I'm TAP, that's their ticker symbol, I'm going to say, if I was the CEO, okay, we got to roll up our sleeves and start over because this just isn't working and we don't need to be in the middle of this. I mean, who wants it? Who needs it? Right? Hey, great to have you all here. I just want to give a couple shout outs to some of the people that are on the live chat. MJ, good to have you here. West, good to have you here. Arnold, very good to see all of you here. I don't do these lives that often, but I do hope that you're watching the show because it's a labor of love. It's a labor of love for me. So make sure you're subscribing and that you hit the bell so that you get the show every single time that we have one, which is Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. We get lots of segments as well. It gets chopped up so you can see some of the clips. And we've been doing a lot of shorts. So all of this is designed to really start spreading the word. So share it if you would, like it, pass the word on. That's a whole other issue, and we can talk about that at length. I mean, and by the way, since I'm here, I might as well. Did you guys see the news that Mike Morell, and we get into this in the podcast from Friday, Mike Morell, who's the former ex-deputy chief of the CIA, he is the one that orchestrated that letter from 50 other ex-spies, and if you ask me, a bunch of political hacks, to influence the outcome of the election. He actually just admitted, and this news came out just yesterday, he admitted that he put that letter together and he got all those people together because they wanted to help Joe Biden. Wow. Okay, so just think about that, because what we now know is that the laptop, well, it actually was true. So the Hunter Biden laptop, which the New York Post got shut down for, I personally was in Facebook jail for a year because they shared a story on it. I mean, seriously, this is crazy stuff. And it was actually after Joe Biden had already become president. So a whole bunch of accounts got shut down. I have tons of friends that were kicked off of Twitter. It was really surreal. I mean, it was like, you can't say these words. I don't even know if I can say them right now, by the way. I don't even know if the algorithm's going to punish me now for saying it. So you couldn't say this. You had all these intelligence chiefs and heads coming out and saying, this is Russian disinformation. Keep in mind, this is the same cast of characters, interestingly enough, same exact cast of characters that told us the Russian dossier, that dirty dossier, that was in fact truth, and that the Russians basically could do anything they wanted because Donald Trump lived in fear of Putin because this tape would be released, etc. Wow. So the fake stuff they tried to tell us was true. The true stuff they tried to tell us was fake. And in the meantime, they get the media all on their side. So the media is pumping this idea, the Russia hoax thing, while simultaneously the media that dares to report on the Biden laptop is immediately in super, super duper trouble. I mean, that is a scary thought. So I leave you with that. I know we were just supposed to be talking about Bud Light, but I leave you with that because I do think that we have to think about where we are as a society. It's why it's so important you subscribe. It is why it is so important that you share this, because that's the only way to break through. The other request I would just ask of you, if you would do me the favor, I have a podcast on Apple. I'm there every single day as well. And we put a lot of efforts into it. So Apple Podcasts, if you can go over there, follow it. You just have to hit the plus sign at the top right-hand corner on your phone. Go to Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign, add me in, and immediately, if you do that, it makes a big difference, a huge difference in terms of the algorithms, because just the volume of people following me, it's a pretty pure algorithm. You don't necessarily have a lot of blockage, but you need to have the base. They're listening to the podcast or following the podcast. So if you could do that, and hey, if you could give it 5 stars while you're over there and maybe even a nice review, hugely appreciated. I just feel so passionately about all of this stuff right now. And I worry, as an American, I've just been so disillusioned and really horrified by the kinds of things that are happening. And look, I want one thing, and I want us to have a safe world. I want us to have a prosperous world. I want us to have a fair world. I want everybody to have lots and lots of opportunity. Again, can't guarantee what the outcome's going to be, but we ought to be doing our best to make sure that we help people get there. And I don't feel that the other side right now is really interested in all of those things. I think there's a lot of effort to divide us, and they are going to use everything they can against conservatives, because in their view, conservatives have suddenly become dangerous. I mean, look, the conservatives I know are just some of the nicest, most sort of wholesome people that you'll ever meet. And there's a consistency there, and a belief in family, and a belief in God, and a belief in hard work, like, or work ethic, all of these values, which I think have made America so successful. If you destroy all that you're going to be left with nothing. And I say this as somebody who has spent a lot of time studying socialist nations and communist nations. I've told you guys probably before, I mean, my first real job was actually on the emerging debt market desk at a very, very big investment bank called Goldman Sachs. And so we were trading Latin American sovereign debt, Venezuelan debt included. And back then, I mean, I was just really young. It was my first real job. I remember Hugo Chavez coming into power, and we thought, okay, great. This is not good, but we don't need to like sell all the bonds right now because he won't do anything really crazy, right? Well, you look at that country today, and he's gone, of course, he died. But what he did was really, really destroy it. I heard him speak many, many times. I've spent a lot of time in Venezuela. And back when he was alive, I attended some of his speeches. I was actually trying to get an interview with him, and they'd say, mañana, mañana, mañana. I'd go around the country and hear all these speeches. I happen to speak Spanish, so I'd listen to them. And I mean, wow, he could go on and on and on. And he would actually have these really interesting sort of button issues. It was very much us versus them. And he really hated sort of the white European American that came in his view, colonized and just ruined Venezuela. And so he had the people all worked up about this. There was a lot of division that was stoked effectively. And it was like, okay, we're going to take from all those people, because years ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they took from us. We're going to take from all those people and we're going to give to you. That's exactly what they did. People lost things. I mean, if you had, a house or a golf course or whatever, Hugo Chavez could come along and say, yep, no, that's mine now, and give it to somebody else. Well, the sad thing is, the country is just a shell of itself. It went from being the most successful economy in all of Latin America to one of the poorest places. It's a travesty. And now, of course, they're cozying up to the Russians. They're cozying up to the Chinese. They're cozying up to the Iranians. It's just a shame, because on top of it, Hugo Chavez kicked all the foreign oil companies, including U.S. oil companies, out. So all they were left with was a bunch of lousy technology for PDVSA. I've been to this area. They've got a wonderful, wonderful oil field. I mean, they could really be hitting it big time if they wanted to really play. I mean, maybe they want to play ball right now, and I've gotten that word. They would like to have more of a relationship with the U.S., but at this point, it's kind of like, gee, guys. I mention it only because it's a great case study in how quickly a country can be destroyed. And if we're going to sit here and we're going to say, okay, we're only going to invest in companies that fit this ESG nonsense requirement, as opposed to we want companies that have actual profitability, then you are going to run that risk. And I love seeing, in the case of this right here, I love seeing the pushback. I love seeing Americans say, you know what? We're going to vote with our dollars. Let me get you some of the numbers, because this is interesting. I was looking at this. When you look at sales, so Bud Light was already not having necessarily a great year, but it kind of fell off the cliff. It fell off a cliff for the week ending April 8th. This would have been right after the campaign was launched, or at least became very known. I'm trying to think, like March 30th, April 1st was around the time when it really started picking up some steam in terms of the media reporting on it and everybody knowing about this Dylan Mulvaney. Bud Light posted declines in off-premise dollar sales of nearly 7%. So that's rather significant. And most interestingly, if you look at what you saw, say, Coors do, it was a very different story. So Coors Light increased dollar sales almost 11%, 10.7%. So that kind of explains the whole story. I mean, Bud Light's going down in sales, like Coors Light is going up. So there you go. So people were saying, yep, this Bud's not for me. I'm not going to drink this. And I appreciate this. I think that this is so important because it shows that we still have the power, right? And we need to use it. I'm surprised that I haven't seen a little bit more pushback from Nike. It probably has perhaps a more woke audience overall, and maybe women are more forgiving. I don't understand why, because it's a giant slap in the face what they did with Nike there and with Dylan Mulvaney, only in that, he's now suddenly selling sports bras. He's selling a garment for a body part he doesn't have. So that is, that's pretty tough. But I think a lot of men were like, not having, I'm not drinking that. I'm not drinking that. You drinking that? No. Anyway, hey, great to have you all here. As always, we got another big show coming out on Monday. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure, if you would, that you hit the alarm. That little bell is so critical. That's when you'll know about our premiere every single day. I'll be back here. In the meantime, we got lots and lots of clips that we're going to get out from the show that we did on Friday, which actually just posted this afternoon. Really interesting material in there. We get into the CIA stuff. It's a deep dive into what is really going on, because I think we need to be informed about that. Keep in mind, if Donald Trump, and right now it looks like he is going to get the nomination. There's another new poll that we talk about in that show. Again, just premiering today. So I'm going to make sure that I would like you to go over and take a look at that one and tell me what you think. Again, I read the comments. But there's a new poll showing that Donald Trump is likely going to be the Republican nominee. So if that holds, and in fact it is him, I can only begin to imagine what's going to happen among sort of these deep state professionals. And I don't think conservatives have really infiltrated, shall we say, government in the way that Democrats have. They haven't infiltrated Hollywood. They haven't infiltrated big tech. They haven't infiltrated Wall Street. I mean, it's just that the world is being controlled by people that maybe don't have values that are, if you're watching this right now and you're mad at Bud Light, that values that are similar enough to us. It's so good to see you guys here. James, get your podcast on Spotify. It is, by the way, it is on Spotify. It is there. It's called The Trish Regan Show. James asking whether the podcast is on Spotify, or telling me that I should get it. It is on Spotify. So if you're listening on Spotify, do that. It's actually on Pandora. It's on Amazon as well. Arnold, you don't have the Apple products. So it's on Google Podcasts as well. Would you? So again, if you guys can do me that favor, that would be amazing. I'll be able to tell right away because I can see the numbers immediately. So if you can subscribe to it so for those of you that don't have Apple, Google Podcasts, you can get it there. You can get it on Spotify. You can get it on Pandora. You can get it on Amazon. So on every platform, I am. Also my website, which I should tell you, we're working on a whole new website. So forgive the look of it right now, but we're doing a whole new website, which is going to come out in just a couple of weeks. And I'm really excited about it. And it's the TrishReganShow.com. And if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, go ahead, just sign up for the newsletter, and we'll try and make sure that you're getting more consistently, at least once a week. I know you don't want to necessarily hear from me every day. If you do, let me know. But at least once a week, I like to reach out to people and just sort of give them an idea of what's going on and what we're working on, et cetera. But if you sign up for the newsletter, it's free. That would be wonderful. I would really, really appreciate it. So we're on all platforms with the podcast. And of course, I'm here. I'm also on Rumble, and I'm on Locals. So trying to hit as many different avenues as possible, because listen, I mean, it's important right now. It's real. I mean, there's days when I feel like I live in North Korea, and I'm exaggerating, obviously, but when you can't get certain things out, or you can't say certain things, or there's you have to have certain verbiage, or my workaround for COVID was March I said it. It was March 2020. And you hear a lot of people now trying to have these other ways of saying things. And I'm like, this is kind of nuts. I just want to be as transparent and honest with people as I can. So I love that you're here. I appreciate it. James, what'd you say? You quit drinking. Good for you in 2016. It's really bad for inflammation. Oh, I'm sorry to hear about your, I'm sorry to hear about the cancer. I'm glad you're still here. I'm glad. He said these booze companies had to get so desperate, but you still see it, right? Like you can tell what they're doing, and it's really, really bad. Interesting. We have a comment there on Francisco. You're saying that Maduro is worse. He's worse than. Come on, he's worse than Chavez. Really? That's interesting to me. I didn't necessarily think that was entirely the case, although I do think that probably the environment has gotten worse. Like one of the things I mentioned earlier that I used to trade sovereign debt in Venezuela. And Francisco, what happened was recently, just in the last couple of years, actually, this was the Trump administration, in an effort to kind of lock down any dollars that Maduro might get access to, the government decided that you could no longer trade, you could no longer buy Venezuelan debt in America. So there's like a sanction against it. And because of these sanctions, the economy is really, really struggling. And the tough thing with sanctions, I always say, look, it's hard because it affects the people, right? Like it's not affecting Maduro or his friends. It's affecting the people of Venezuela. And so that's been really, really tough. But look, I love not happening. Thank you. I'm glad you're here to help me fight the algorithms. It is really pretty amazing to see what we're all up against. And I have a feeling it's going to be worse, which is why I'm kind of going into high gear right now. And you're going to get a lot of content from me. And I need to do this because we need to share it. We need to get it out because come 2024, I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit harder to do. We are still a free country, as Wes says. We are still a free country after all, for now anyway. It's so good, like I said, to have you guys here. Really great. I love this. We're going to do this more, right? We'll do this a little bit more. It's just that it was a Saturday afternoon. And I thought, this news just broke. And I know how much you guys care about this story. I've seen it. I know how much I care about this story. I got to tell you a quick before I let you go. My neighbor actually said to me that he was buying shares of Molson Coors the other day. This is the ticker symbol TAP. Now, I never give stock advice. You'll hear me give a lot of macro advice. And I did tell you, did I not, that the Elon Musk Twitter deal was going to have to go through. There was no way the Delaware court was going to let him out of that. And so I guess if you bought shares of Twitter, that was probably a really good thing. But I don't give it investing advice because it's too, you need to see a professional investment advisor for that. And everybody is a very specific sort of situation. And some people should take on certain kinds of risks and other people shouldn't. So I'm never giving investing advice, but I was just anecdotally telling the story of a friend of mine who does invest and say, yeah, I'm buying shares of TAP. I'm buying shares of Molson Coors. And he did this like the day the Dylan Mulvaney thing came out. And so he certainly did well with that, right? And that is pretty evident, again, as you look, and I just showed you earlier that stock price. Here's Molson Coors. Look at that. I mean, do you see the little circle down there? I did that. That was like where it was around when the story first broke. $51.68. Now it's at $58.32. And you heard me read the sales numbers. You compare and contrast with Bud again, which was up at almost $67 a share. It went all the way down to 63 and change, 64 and change. It's kind of like just managing to eke out a teeny bit of a gain, $65.52. I don't know how much longer that really will continue. It shows you that these boycotts, they really, really, really can have legs, and that's good. Dub saying if the women bash Anheuser-Busch buyers, they will absolutely get crushed. So yeah, I mean, look, I think women overall, I mean, I look at Nike too. Like I'm surprised more women aren't more upset about Nike, because that is sort of a slap in the face to them. But I think this one is just sort of, it's an image thing, right? Like, whatever. Okay, so fine. It's got a male image. It's got a fratty image. So what? Like, that's your customer. I don't think any frats are going to be drinking it. I think it's one big, giant joke. And like I said, if anybody orders a Bud Light, you're going to be like, really? Really? All right. Hey, great to see you guys. I hope you have a absolutely fabulous, wonderful weekend. And we will be right back here with you on Monday. In the meantime, do check out the show that we put out today. I'd love if you could do that. There's a picture of Mickey, I think, on the thumbnail. But we get into both the Trump poll that came out from the Wall Street Journal. We get into what's going on in terms of the intelligence professionals that wanted us to think one thing and really, might have had a big effect, really, if you think about it, on 2020 as a result. We get into Bud Light. We talk about somebody that, well, I knew about this guy. I knew about him, Mr. Beast, but I knew about him because I've got kids, and I had to take all their devices away after COVID, right? But during COVID, they got some exposure to a lot of things, including Mr. Beast, and they loved his show. And like every kid I know, like just loves Mr. Beast, and they want to be Mr. Beast. And so if you haven't heard of him, he's like the biggest YouTuber ever, and he has a huge business, some $500 million business, $500 million. And one of the cast members on his show, which is a childhood friend, just recently came out and is transitioning. So Chris is now going to become Christina. So we get into that and what it means for the show and the business, and also what it means for the young kids maybe that are watching this show. So that's kind of important. And then one more thing, I'll just preview this quickly. We get into what the Biden administration is doing with mortgages. So May 1st, this is important for you to know. If you're looking to buy a home, if you have a good credit score, meaning you're like 680 or above and you pay your bills on time, you're actually going to have to pay extra fees. And you're going to have to pay extra fees to cover for all the people that have bad credit scores. I mean, does that not sound kind of Venezuela-like? That's kind of wild. And not only that, if you happen to have saved more money for your deposit, like if you're putting down 15% or you're paying 20%, you're going to pay even more. So this is this whole robbing Peter to pay Paul thing that the Biden administration is so keen on. It's very socialist-like. So all of those stories are in there. Plus, I'm joined by Dave Ramsey's daughter. You know Dave Ramsey. Her name is Rachel Cruz. She's got a lot of ideas. She is giving financial advice on how you can weather the storm no matter what happens politically, no matter what happens economically, no matter what happens in the market. And I like hearing things like that. I'm not someone who needs to make a huge return, but I like having steady returns, and I'm a big believer in that. So I thought that it would be worth having her on the show to talk about some of those things you could do. So go and listen. It's Friday's show, and I will see you probably over the weekend. I'm sure I'll be back at some point. Anyway, great to have you here. Make sure you hit the bell. Thanks.